Welcome to the Manifest Your Wellbeing Series, where we talk about mental attitude, nutrition, and exercise. I'm Leandro, your well-being and nutrition coach, and this is the episode number 7, where I'm going to talk about self-esteem. In order to present today's topic, we are going to start talking about self-concept, and as we progress throughout the video, you are going to find out how self-concept and self-esteem are related. If someone asks you the question, "Who are you?" the easier way to answer is to say your name, occupation, place of birth, age, and maybe things that you like and dislike, such as food and films. If you are pressed in giving a deeper answer, then you will have to consult with your self-concept. To be able to answer this question in detail, you need to have a good understanding of the elements composing your self-concept. Self-concept is an individual's belief about himself or herself. It is a cognitive structure that includes attitudes, attributes, judgments, and it is a composition of competing past, present, and future identities. Self-concept contains the sum of beliefs, feelings, and experiences that builds the person's identity and answers that question: what am I? What am I made of? Self-concept is what is believed to be true about oneself, and it operates both in the conscious and unconscious level. Think about the memories, values, personality traits, beliefs, prejudices, and behaviors. The content of self-concept is like a bag full of all these elements that, when put together, are the source which an individual goes to when in need to answer the question, "Who am I?" Self-concept is not static. It is an active, dynamic structure that changes over time, and it can do so in a positive or negative way. When self-concept evolves positively, it leads the individual to behave in ways that bring the fulfillment of his potential. This process leads to great self-knowledge, where thoughts are independent from feelings and where the individual develops the ability to coexist with others as an autonomous being, able to live by his own standards and values. Every experience has an effect on oneself, regardless if the person is aware or not. Therefore, any experience can have an influence on how self-concept is shaped over time. One's self-concept affects the way someone feels and behaves, because it is the frame of reference from where the individual initiates action by influencing how reality is interpreted. Negative or destructive thoughts, belief systems, or attitudes can damage one's self-concept and even pave the way for unhealthy relationships, unhealthy behaviors, or other handicaps that stop an individual from fulfilling his or her potential. For instance, a person who lacks or has low self-respect may act in a way that leads to unhappiness, frustration, sense of guilt, or having unjustifiable excuses to lower aspirations in life. Because self-concept is our deepest vision, it shapes the type of life we live by influencing our choices and decisions. Now that we have an idea about what self-concept is, let's explore how it develops over time. Let's imagine a newborn baby and think about how the baby's self-concept evolves over time. When a baby is born, she is not aware of her own existence. She has no sense of self. She doesn't have the concept of being a separate entity, and she experiences all the world as herself. At this stage, there is no differentiation. For 2 years of age, the child develops the understanding that objects continue to exist even when she is not watching. At this stage, she can also recognize her thoughts and feelings, but she assumes that everyone else has the same knowledge as she has. From 5 years of age, she already has the ability to judge her own actions, distinguishing between positive and negative qualities. At this stage, self-concept already exists. By 9 years of age, she is able to compare herself with other children. She can assess her own actions, attitudes, and performance. Through adolescence, she is presented with a number of challenges, and as she gradually emancipates from her parents, she has to make adjustments to new social roles. References linked to childhood are abandoned, giving space to a self-identity more connected to adulthood. In this process, the set of ideas she has about herself and others is redefined, influencing self-esteem levels. In adulthood, new roles are adopted. Her identity is no longer just as a daughter or a student, and she becomes a spouse, a mother, or a member of a community. By then, self-image is more complex, and social comparison with others remains an important mechanism of self-assessment. In this episode, I also want to talk about self-esteem and its importance to well-being. But before doing so, it's worth to understand how self-concept develops and where self-esteem is positioned within self-concept structure. As I said, self-concept is composed of different elements. It's also an essential part in developing personality, and it can be divided in different dimensions. Self-image is related to how a person perceives himself. It is related to bodily images, general attributes, and general personality tendencies. It is how I see myself and how I feel about myself in the present moment. It is the dimension involved in asking and answering the following questions. Am I beautiful or ugly? Am I a good or bad person? Am I active or lazy? Am I liked or disliked? Am I a success or a failure? Self-image is like the smaller version of self-concept. The way you see yourself is very important because it will affect your thoughts, attitudes, and the way you relate to others. Next dimension of self-concept is the ideal self. The ideal self is what we want to be as a person. If the self-image is the way I see myself now as a fact, the ideal self are my aspirations regarding what I want to become. It is my perception of how I should behave based on my standards. It is how I value certain personal attributes and how I can incorporate these attributes within my personality. It is the motivational force that makes me ask the following questions. Do I inspire to be a more kind person? Do I value courage? Do I believe that it's important to be fair with others? Do I think that being a productive member of society is important? In this way, the ideal self creates in me a longing for processing the attributes I desire. Now is the interesting part, because there is a relationship between self-image and ideal self. The closer they are from each other, the more balanced the person is. I repeat, the closer they are from each other, the more balanced the person is. The gap between what a person is and what she wants to become is a motivating force in direction of pursuing the desired goals. The way the ideal self motivates is by making comparisons between self-image and ideal self, and directs energy in becoming what one potentially can be. Where there are huge discrepancies between self-image and ideal self, there is more room for negative emotions. If it is impossible to reduce these discrepancies, the person will feel disappointed and it can negatively affect their mental well-being. Well-being can be influenced by our actualities or our level of success in life in relation to our potential. If our level of achievement is consistently below our potential, it can negatively impact our self-esteem levels. If we are in a position where outcomes don't match what you are able to do, we can protect our mental well-being either by striving to live closer to our full potential or to be willing to adjust our expectations when trying to achieve a goal. Self-esteem is the third dimension of self-concept. Self-esteem is your opinion of yourself. It is your confidence about your abilities and are your beliefs about your own worth. Self-esteem is a person's sense of self-worth, an attitude towards oneself, and high levels of self-esteem are correlated with well-being. Self-esteem is an important part of human motivation and is associated with desired outcome. However, it is also true that trying to maintain high levels of self-esteem at all costs can lead to negative outcomes. By being true to ourselves, we can maintain a healthy level of self-esteem that is adaptive and doesn't require defense. Self-esteem is dynamic. Over our lives, it can increase or decrease, and its level can fluctuate from one day to the other for reasons that are not necessarily easy to identify. Sometimes we may wake up and are haunted by negative thoughts which the origin doesn't seem to be rational but purely organic. Other times we may wake up full of energy and feeling high levels of self-esteem, and we can't necessarily explain why. Self-esteem can be contingent or real. Contingent is the self-esteem dependent on external factors. It is when the individual doesn't have total control and where external factors can affect self-esteem levels. If the way you value yourself and your sense of worth depends on the approval of others or on succeeding at any activity, it is very likely that your self-worth will be negatively affected if things don't go the way you expect. People with contingent self-esteem either need to meet self-imposed standards or they depend on others' approval to maintain their self-worth. This behavior requires one to always have to meet expectations with the ego deeply involved. This can lead to defensive processes such as rationalization and self-deception that are linked to less positive mental health. A more stable way to maintain one's self-esteem is based on being true to oneself. where self-worth is developed over time by acting autonomously in life, by being the best that one can be without having to constantly compare one's achievement with others, and by having authentic relationships. Now I'm going to give you two examples of contingent self-esteem. One way self-esteem can be externally affected is when we accept and internalize other people's views of ourselves as our own views. Think about cases of abusive relationships where one person, person A, makes negative remarks about another person, person B, and says things like, "You are good for nothing. You always make mistakes. This is too complex for you to understand." The person B, the person being targeted by such abuses, can over time start believing these statements, and it can have a detrimental effect on self-esteem. Praise or criticism can be an external factor that may affect self-esteem levels. Self-esteem levels can also fluctuate if a person who we care about tells us something positive or negative about ourselves. A healthy self-esteem is built on strong foundations where it doesn't fully depend on the approval of others, but from accepting oneself as following one's own path. That's why it is important not to rely on others to regulate our self-perception. The more dependent we become to others, the less we are capable of doing things ourselves, and it creates even more dependency. It is a vicious cycle. We are all fallible beings. Sometimes we make mistakes. Doesn't mean that we are worthless. Every mistake we make opens a door to learn a lesson and do better the next time. Being dependent on others for approval can turn into a never-ending quest for self-esteem. Another way that self-esteem level depends on external factor is when it is invested in a goal where we believe that to have worth and value as human beings, it's necessary to succeed. That worth will be measured by the outcome of our actions. In this case, we work on achieving success and avoiding failure, trying to show to ourselves that we are worthy by succeeding in what we do. If we have a positive outcome, we feel good about ourselves and experience high levels of self-esteem. If we fail, we feel bad about ourselves. We feel not good enough and with low self-esteem. Imagine an athlete that heavily invests his self-esteem levels in the outcome of a competition. For this athlete to get a boost in his self-esteem, he needs to be better than others in the sport he competes. Such self-assessment is transitory, and this type of self-worth is fragile because as soon as the athlete is not on the top of his game, his self-esteem levels will suffer. This approach can also affect his anxiety levels because, on the top of paying attention to his own performance, he may get fixated on the performance of other athletes that present a potential risk. He may worry about future potential threats, such as other athletes that could take his place. Trying to be the best this way is a great motivational force, but comes with risks of creating frustrations and anxiety if we don't get the desired outcome. From a young age, we learn that having self-esteem is a good thing, that we are wired to seek and maintain high levels of it, that we have a basic need to see ourselves are valuable, that high self-esteem is critical to achieve success in many domains of life, and that it correlates with well-being. If self-esteem is a good thing to have, can I say that the higher the self-esteem, the more successful, healthier, and happier I am? Would it be correct to assume? What I'm interested in talking about now is if there are any negative consequences of high self-esteem. To answer this question, I would like to invite you to think in the context of goal setting and goal achievement. When you make a commitment to achieve a specific goal, let's say to start a business, the situation presents itself with a variety of possible outcomes. When you decide to commit to your goal, let's say to open a business, you place yourself in a position where the outcome in part depends on what you do. When you are sure about what you want to achieve, you make an assessment of risks involved with starting your business, and you make an estimation of the rewards that you will have the chance to acquire should your idea prosper. You have to make an assessment that is as accurate as possible, commit to it, and live up to your commitments. The strategy with the best rewards is the one where you select the highest goals that you can successfully achieve. These goals are the most difficult ones, and the higher the levels of complexity, the narrower the margin of error you have. Errors can actually happen in both ways. You can select a goal that is higher than what you can achieve, and you may fail. Also, if your goal is lower than your potential, you undercommit and get fewer results than what you could possibly get. How is self-esteem related to that? If you have a high self-esteem where you tend to overestimate your abilities and you are overconfident, you may end up selecting a goal that is too hard to achieve and you simply fail. Let's think about what could be worse, overcommitting or undercommitting. If you undercommit a little, you are more likely to succeed, but with lower rewards, of course. But if you overcommit, it is more likely that you will fail, and then you get nothing. So, in this case, failure is a worse outcome than watered down success. It would be better to succeed, get lower outcomes, than try to achieve in something that is so complex that it's not very likely to succeed. People with high self-esteem are considered to be more likely to succeed in life, and self-esteem is good for mental health and adjustment. On the other hand, people with high self-esteem can make unrealistic claims about themselves, overestimating what they can accomplish and selecting goals that are too high, increasing the chances to failure. Overall, people with high self-esteem cope well with challenges in life, tolerate failures and sadness at times, and are open with people. Self-esteem is associated with motivation, performance, and well-being. A more stable self-esteem is one that is based in a solid sense of self, where an individual's self-worth doesn't have to be put to the test. and there are no comparisons to be made and no expectations to be met in order to feel worthy. A person true to herself with a kind of high self-esteem based in solid sense of self would have goals and try to accomplish them as well. The person would put lots of effort in accomplishing her goals and would be emotionally affected by the outcomes of her effort. She would be pleased to succeed or disappointed with failure, just like anyone else. But her feelings of worth as a person would not depend on the outcome of accomplishments. She would not feel superior when she succeeds, or depressed and worthless when she failed. This is the end of the episode, and it is the last video on the topic of mental well-being. So far, we have spoken about mindset strategies, mental attitude, responsibility, emotions, breathing, body posture, and in this video, self-esteem. From now on, we are going to talk about nutrition, and in the next video, I'm going to talk about proteins. If you are enjoying this series, please consider subscribing to my channel and share this content with your friends. Thank you.